Servus and hello. Matthias Eichler here, and this is Singletrack. Before the weather truly turns and we are heading into a gloomy fall, I want to bring you one more summer recap episode with no other than Maria Dalzot, La Sportiva athlete and registered dietitian from Bellingham, Washington. Maria had another action-filled summer in the Alps with races at Lavaredo in the Dolomites and CCC at UTMB. There's lots to chat about, but before we get into it, I want to tell you about our upcoming winter race, Saturnalia. We're doing it again, the 10K race, just a week before Christmas at Squaxin Park in Olympia. It's not some monumental, grueling battle with the elements deep in the woods of nowhere. Saturnalia is a fun winter celebration on some of Olympia's most beautiful trails right in the neighborhood. Come out and race with your friends for some holiday fun. RockCandyRunning.com has all the details, and I can't wait to cheer with you. But now, let's get back to summer, back to alpine trails in faraway lands, and let's hear from Maria. Maria, you're back on Singletrack. I'm super excited to have you. You've been on the show before. It was high time that you're back. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. It's great to be here.
One of my favorite things I love doing with you is you always spend a lot of time in Europe. You love racing in Europe during the summer, but you're from the Pacific Northwest, and so you have this perfect perspective of what it means to, on one side, be a tourist over there, but on the other side, also having been over there often enough that you have really best practices, you have it figured out. And so I just always love catching up with you after the summer and saying, so, hey, how was it? I didn't get over there, so I'm jealous, but also like, well, how is it over there for as a US runner? So we talk about all of this, but let's start at, how was the summer?
Oh, the summer was a mixed bag, but it ended probably on a low note, but it started out probably as high as it could get. And so I'll back up. My goal for the coming into 2023 was to race the Lavaredo 80K. So that's about 51 miles or so. And the reason that Lavaredo was on my radar is for a couple reasons. Number one, it's La Sportiva, who is my main sponsor. I've been with them for 10 years now, which is hard to believe, but it's their main event. It's funny. It's when you walk into the small town of Cortina, where the finish line is, everybody has Sportivas on. Like it's so popular there, and it's so unlike other places that you visit. So that was my main goal coming into 2023. And the reason that we did that was because the changing landscape of UTMB. I ran the CCC last year. It was a great experience. I wanted to do it again, but the qualifying procedures now were it was not something that we were going to chase after and spend hundreds and thousands of dollars chasing. So we're like, we'll do something new, and just kind of focus on Lavaredo. And so I went over to Europe in June, I think about 10 days. I usually go over about 10 days. For me, that is where I feel most comfortable. I'm able to adjust. As you mentioned before, I've had the privilege of going over there many times. And so it's become very comfortable. We stay in the same place. We know the drill. We know where to get food. There's no guesswork. There's nothing that is, you don't have the typical stresses of what one would think of when traveling so far away. And so I went over, and we fly into Geneva, and we stay in a small mountain town where there are hardly any people. It's us and some cows, and it's a great place to rest after the long journey. And we had to do like an 8-hour drive to get to Cortina, Italy, for where the Lavaredo takes place in the Italian Dolomites, which is the northern part of the Italian Alps. And it was an awesome week because it was actually the same time that the La Sportiva International Athlete Meeting was taking place. And so the week before, I would say like the Tuesday before a Saturday race, we would do group runs together, and we got to see all the new products for 2024. And we got to do, give our input and feedback on different products. And it was just incredibly special. Like, to even just go all the way there just to participate in that, race aside, was really special.
Yeah. That's amazing. I grew up in the 80s in Germany, and when the climbing sort of first got really popular, La Sportiva was the brand, right? And so I've grown up with. I in fact bought that anniversary approach shoe from La Sportiva with the old throwback logo, because I'm like, that's the logo I grew up with.
Oh, that's so cool! I love that.
Yeah, so I have like a weird like fan history of La Sportiva for many, many years. So it's super cool that you're sponsored by them and sort of connected and get to experience it from sort of that inside level. I've been in Cortina and in the Dolomites many times, and it's interesting that sometimes we Americans look at the Alps and we see the big glaciers of the Swiss and French Alps, right? And the Alps are bigger, longer, and there is a Dolomites where it just is so different, right? The mountains are so completely different. They aren't as high, they aren't as snow covered in the summer, but the jaggedness, it's a completely different experience, right?
Yes. I mean, spot on. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Dolomites, I believe, so they're named after the person who discovered them, but if you had to translate it, would be like pale mountains. They're made out of this dolomite is a rock, and so they're just very rocky features. So not like when you were saying about the kind of the Swiss landscape of the green and then the pastures, but this is just all very rocky, and it's very when I first drove into Cortina, like, they're very intimidating. These massive rock structures are just kind of in your face, and they're so big, and it's really pretty incredible. And so I can't recommend visiting that area enough, because it is so different. And also, on that note, the town of Cortina is really cool. You don't get for those of you who've experienced Chamonix in the summer, you're shoulder to shoulder with tourists and so many people roaming the streets, and Cortina has the same vibe with less people. So again, if you're looking for something similar but different, it's a really nice change.
Yeah, Cortina is another one of those towns similar to Chamonix and Garmisch-Partenkirchen, where the Olympic Winter Games were held very early on in the 20th century. They were some of the first towns, and so they, at such an early point, developed a focus on tourism and a focus on sports tourism. And Chamonix obviously has taken that to a completely different level, because the French are endurance and adrenaline junkies. And so they've taken this to a different level. But there are lots of towns that do lots of races in the Alps that are completely low key and are completely different. But Cortina is another one of those towns where there is the history of the Olympic Games, and it's in history from 80 years ago, right? There's also a super cool history with James Bond movies. It's one of my favorite James Bond movie, the ridiculous scenes in Cortina. But I think we're digressing too far. Nothing, there's Roger Moore and a parachute with the Union Jack on it.
Yes. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. That's funny. So yeah, it was really great to get to know that area and explore and have an appreciation for that town that kind of gets in the shadow of Chamonix a bit. And so that was really neat. And then as far as the race goes, it was one of those days that just everything was effortless. did everything just came naturally. Food intake, water, the temperatures, it was a bit on the warm side, but it didn't bother me. I felt really strong. My training leading into the race, I had really a lot of consistency, months and months and months of work that just kind of was able to manifest on the day. And I don't know how much into details that you want to get about it, but I ended up being seventh woman crossing the
Fantastic. Yeah.
line, and so it was my first top 10 finish in an international race, and so that just felt so good. Like I just remember crossing the finish line, and my husband GoPros a lot of my races and stuff, and so if you're interested, he has it on video on my Instagram. It's saved, and I just kept saying yes over and over again, because it's so hard to get the stars to align on the day that you want it to. And I've been in the sport for so long now. I mean, I'm 35 years old, and I started competing when I was 11.
Mm-hmm.
And so just you rack up the bad days when you're in the sport for so long, and it just makes these good days feel that much more sweet. And so I really took a lot of time to savor that, and I don't know if you can tell, I still am savoring it. Like, it was still such a special moment to be there in Italy, and it was my sponsor's big race, and also the land of my ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to go visit my family right after, who live in Italy. Like, it was just magical.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely amazing, and I'm so glad that you got this experience, and especially for you as a pro. And perhaps I'm forming this a little bit as a question.
Mm-hmm.
You know for yourself if this is a good day, and
Yes.
does it need to? Do you feel like it's important then that you're also placing? Is that in a manifestation of it being a good day, or could you have a good day and you come in, whatever, 58th too, right? I mean, how
Yeah.
much is the
Right.
placement an important aspect?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think there's a lot of nuance in that answer. And as far as knowing you have a good day, gosh, I don't even, like, it's a felt sense of like, I got this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no matter what happens, I got this. And I can't even describe that knowing. But it was that day. And I think given my training and what my workouts, like, it makes sense that I was that far up the field. Like, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Given the competition level and where I am now. You put that in the UTMB context, which is where everybody all over the world is trying to get there, arguably the most competitive race in the world. I could have a fantastic day and be 30, 40 place,
Mm-hmm.
right? You just never know. Or
Right.
I could be top 15, top 20. You don't know. It just depends on, because on paper, it almost doesn't matter, because it depends on how your competitors are feeling, and it just, who's on, who's not. So it's a really hard question to answer.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the Lavaredo course, because I think this is always one thing that I'm trying to paint a good picture of, because we see so many images of UTMB, and UTMB is so nuts, right? It's deservedly the biggest race because the fans come out, right? I mean, there is a denseness of happening that goes beyond, what the police are trying to manufacture from a media point of view, right? I mean, people are really there. How does that compare to Lavaredo? Especially coming, from the Pacific Northwest. Where do you stack this up? Describe sort of the atmosphere of the race a little bit and stuff. And in what we know from U.S. races, what we know from UTMB, how do the South Tyroleans do a race that is inarguably, what the second biggest. I mean, it's also a massive race, right? You're not signing up for some little, running club 15K or so, right? It is a massive race.
Right. I think for anybody who has not experienced the grandiosity of UTMB, you'd show up and be like, oh my gosh, this is super organized and they have all their ducks in a row and they have their shit together. Nothing's kind of out of place. However, comparing the two, it's definitely more low-key. The Italians are a little more laid back. There's definitely a more laid back vibe, which I like. They still have the music that gets you going at the start.
You still run out way too fast.
Yeah, right. But there's just, it's like a notch down in the intensity, and I prefer that. I think it's a nice balance of, there's an atmosphere, people come out for it, but not in the just hordes like they do for UTMB. It's a lot more remote, and so the aid stations are not in these down in a village where it's really accessible via cars. I mean, you are in the heart of the Dolomites, and so the aid stations, there's going to be 10 people there, not like hundreds. So it's more, it's quieter. You get alone time where you don't get alone time when you're running a UTMB race. Somebody is always there, and if they're not, wait 10 seconds and they'll be right there. So you have more alone time out there, and it just feels a lot more remote. In Chamonix or UTMB, it seems to me, I mean, there are exceptions, there are different angles of the course and whatnot, but you can always see a town, you can always see civilization, and it's not like that when you're in the Dolomites.
How does the actual trail compare?
Lots of rocks.
Yeah.
Lots of rocks. Yeah.
All these pale mountains there, slowly starting to drip their rocks, right?
That's right. Very, very rocky. You get some reprieve there were a couple sections of like dirt road where you could, just kind of let your mind wander a bit, but very, very rocky. Compared to US standards. I know when I was there with some of the La Sportiva international athletes who are from different parts of the world, they're like, oh, this course is runnable, and they're running on, because they're used to running on like just the most outrageous courses. And so again, it's all relative, but compared to what you see in the US, it was technical, very rocky, there were parts where you had to hold on to ropes, and it got really technical with scrambling. So it was hard to, like, you don't get that a lot of places, like speaking from the Pacific Northwest, you don't get that unless you go we have a 4-week window in the summer where we can get high up in the mountains, but the type of consistently long uphills and downhills of that technicality, it's hard to train for that.
Did the 80 K course go by the Cinque Torre?
It did not. I know, and so the 120K does, but it goes through there in the dark. So
I know.
Yeah.
It goes through the dark if you're slow. If you're fast, I think if you're slow, you see it in the daytime.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. No, so the 80K course did not. It went through. Oh, let me see. Oh, what's the other one? I'm probably gonna.
Is it the Tre Screams? You see those though, right?
Right, but what is the Passo Giao?
Okay.
Passo Giao is the kind of the famous, like, you can actually drive up there, and it's incredible. But no, we're thinking, I know we haven't talked about 2024 yet, but there's the 120K for next year is kind of in the back of my head.
Okay, keep me in the loop on that, because I'm collecting stones because UTMB has to happen in some way for myself, but really, really, the Lavaredo 120K is for me the race that I want to run. It's the race that I'm more interested in running than I want to experience Chamonix, and it's one of those things where you have to experience, and we're going to talk about this. But when it comes to actual race courses that I want to run, Lavaredo is by far the on my number one list.
I love knowing that, and it would be so fun to line up with you next year.
Right? I mean, it would be
Yes,
super cool. Okay, we'll
yes.
we'll keep that
Okay.
on the back burner.
Okay, sounds good.
So I'm so excited that you had this amazing race. I'm excited for you. This is like such a great experience. So then afterwards, you took some days off
Yes.
and
Yes.
stayed over there for a little bit and hiked.
Well, we took a couple of days off. I went to I have family who lives in Varese, Italy, which is close to Milan, and so we went and visited them for a couple of days. And this is where, in hindsight, what potentially affected my race at CCC. I took about 3 days off after having this massive race, given this really big effort, and then my husband Tad and I fast packed the you can call it multiple things, the TMB, the Trail Mont Blanc, the soft UTMB. We did the 106-mile course in 5 days, and so that's like 30,000 feet of climbing. Doing it in 5 days, it's like you still kind of have to book it a bit to get it in, and have time to like hang out and rest and enjoy it. So again, a magical experience. The weather wasn't great, but we got to experience snow, rain, sun, the whole.
Did you stay in the huts?
We did a combo. We did a combo of hotels and huts, just because it worked out that way naturally, because the huts book up really quickly, and so either they weren't accessible, or the price is such that a hotel could be just as cost effective and you get your own room, whereas in the huts you are like
it's a giant group room.
You're nestled up with some strangers. So I got to cuddle with a French couple, and that was an experience in and of itself. But if I had a choice, I would choose a hotel.
No, absolutely. These huts are magical, but there is a limit to the magic, for sure.
Yes. That's right.
Usually starts with the smell of hiking socks, but
yes. Yeah, I feel like we really got a taste of every aspect of that track, and the infrastructure is such that they really cater to people doing this iconic hike, and so people know what you're doing. No one has to guess. They know the drill. You're not the weirdo doing it. You're one of like hundreds and hundreds of people doing this.
Yeah. Well, super. So that was an experience. That was your reward after the big race. But you insinuated that this potentially had an effect on your training then and your performance leading up to CCC.
Yes. So again, we didn't. At this point, like we were actually in the middle of the track, and I can even like picture where we were. And I got service, and I got an email that said, "Congratulations, you got into CCC." And I was like, what? This is great. Like, I was still such on a high from my race. I can do anything. This is great. And I'm not one of those people that are like, oh, the best is yet to come. I have all these years ahead of me. I'm very much like, you never know what's going to happen. You got to kind of take every opportunity and seize the day. And so that night we were in a hotel in Courmayeur, and I just was looking at flights, and I'm like, they're pretty reasonable. And I did it so fast where I was like, yes, I'm going to do this. I booked the flights. I know. And so I was in the middle of the TMB trek when I agreed and made tickets to do CCC, which was like 5-6 weeks away, which is kind of bonkers. But again, I was like, oh, I can handle it.
I mean, you're literally the meme, right? That's floating around on Instagram of like, when is the worst time or the best time to sign up for a race?
Yes,
and you just completed a race. You're like, yes, I'll do this.
That was me. Yes,
so,
exactly.
So you were then one of the recipients, because there was this wave when all of a sudden UTMB invited a whole bunch of more people in. I heard through the grapevine, and people sort of sort of responded and posted on social media that they got an invitation, right? And do you know the backstory of where that invitation came from?
Honestly, I can't speak to that. I know mine was because of my performance at Lavaredo. So I don't know I don't know
Yeah,
what,
yeah.
but I do know that the process that they had was not conducive
Hmm.
for the race that they wanted. And so it only makes sense that they let more people in, but I can't speak to
Yeah.
who knows what the logic or
It
process
is it
was
is
that.
such a weird game that they're playing, right?
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
I think
Exactly.
that they are sort of
And no one knows the rules.
no, exactly. I think the rules for the average amateurs now that there is sort of this time when um and things have settled, right? And we've transitioned from the previous system to the new system. I think for the average people, the lottery qualifications, you get a stone, you have an index, you sign up. I think that it makes reasonably sense, right? But then for you as elites, you can sort of start looking at like, okay, how can I direct qualify? And there's a direct qualification based on your index and then based on your performance, right? And so I think they're trying to sort of like iron this whole thing out. And while in some respects it's great if you get an invitation, right? I mean, you clearly were excited about it. The fact that you didn't plan for it then also sort of completely messed up your your racing calendar, your
Right.
training, and ultimately then your performance, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I'll be curious to see what they come up with for years to come. Like, for example, when they said that I qualified, they told me I qualified for 2023 and 2024. So I have an entry for 2024. And so I'm kind of in the same boat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned wanting to do Lavaredo, but I learned that I don't I'm not Courtney DeWalt, so I can't do these two back-to-back races,
Yeah.
and I can't do it. So I also want to recognize that this is a good problem to have. I want to
Yeah.
recognize that like this is not worth getting stressed out of or complaining about. But it is kind of bonkers.
Yeah.
I don't know the rhyme or reason to that at all.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I talked with um, the German Hannes Namberger, and he won Eiger, and he said in Europe it's starting to feel a little bit oversaturated with races. Like,
Mm,
you know, elite athletes are starting to have the ability to run so many different UTMB events that they don't have a competition, can get easily direct qualified, which is great because it gives a fairly easy access into UTMB, right? But it sort of spread things out a little bit. And so I
right.
think we got to see how all of this sort of shakes up and stuff. And I don't know, Doug Meyer from Run the Alps, he wrote a book about UTMB. I don't know if you've read it yet, but one of the things that came out for me is that, and I think the Pilates are struggling a little bit with that, is that at their heart, they want to create an event. They at the heart, they are struggling between two things. On one side, they want to create an event that gives the most people the experience to have an adventure around Mont Blanc, right?
Right.
So they're still focused on the every man's experience, which
Mm-hmm.
is amazing, right? That's what we want, right? But on the other side, they are also keenly aware that they want to be the absolute cream of the crop, top race that everybody wants to do, right? And so I think there's some tension there of
Yeah.
like, how do you maintain access for everyone? And how do you make sure that all the pros show up? And I think that's what they were doing, right? They were looking and I was like, hey, we need this insane media coverage. Let's get as many people invited as possible to stack the field. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, assumption on my part, but that's a little bit sort of what I think they potentially did, right?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense.
So let's talk about you, though. So you were spontaneously sitting in a hotel somewhere in the middle of the Alps, book a trip.
Yes.
And for you, and I mean, this you've been doing this for a long time. You have a fairly rigorous training plan. You're not, you can't be crazy spontaneous, right? You need to honor your body. So then you finish the rest of the tour, but your brain's already thinking, right? You're
Right.
already laying
Exactly.
out like, how am I going to
Exactly.
do this?
Yes.
I only
Yes.
have a couple weeks, right?
That's exactly right. And exactly. I was still really fired up. We came back to the States and I took maybe one down week of rest. And then because now I was on a timeline, I had 4 weeks to get in, solid training before backing off and flying over again.
Yeah.
So I felt pressure those 4 weeks. Like I gotta hit those 4 weeks, and I did. I got in the volume that I wanted to do. I got in the long runs that I wanted to do, and my workouts went really well. Looking back on it, there were a couple long runs where they should have been kind of like red flags of like, oh, things are not like, this is weird. Like this doesn't typically happen. But because I was able to come back and nail my Wednesday workouts, I kind of shrugged it off, right? Like you want to stay positive. It's not, you want to be optimistic about things. But looking back on it, I'm like, that it makes sense. That was my body saying, we're really kind of, running out of steam here. But I backed off significantly leading into the race for like 2 weeks leading into the race. I didn't do much of anything to make sure I was completely rested. I got to Europe again. Everything went smooth as far as that goes. We got there and the weather was just shit. The weather was terrible when we got there. And we were up in this mountain town sitting close to 6,000 feet. And it was just, we couldn't leave the house. Like
I remember seeing the pictures on Instagram, and I'm like, these like 2 weeks leading up to UTMB week, and even like the beginning of UTMB week, right? TDS and PTL had an absolute horrifying start, right?
Gosh, those poor people. Oh my gosh. Yes.
So,
and then that's the other thing. It's a gamble. Anytime you go over there, it's a gamble because it doesn't matter that it's August, you're in the mountains and it could snow. And I mean, that happened to me last year. My race got canceled. I went over there in September and it got canceled because of snow. So it's every time, no matter, how your body is, it depends on the weather. It's such a gamble for anybody going over there.
Can you speak, if you're saying gamble, can you speak to this as an elite athlete, because it becomes also a financial decision in some respect, right? Because
yes.
Do you feel pressure when you get an invite into CCC that you feel like my sponsor would want that? Or do you feel like, now I have a good enough relationship, it doesn't really matter what I do? Where are you at with that?
Yeah. And again, I can only speak for myself, and I'm more the latter. Like I had felt zero pressure. Again, I did Lavaredo, which is La Sportiva's main event. I couldn't have done more around that event for them and be a part of it. I felt zero pressure. And again, I've been with them for 10 years now. We have solid rapport. So I felt zero pressure. This was absolutely all on me. This was all my doing. I did this. I will own that.
Good. No, that's great to hear, right? Because I think that's one of those things where, I mean, I think everybody in some respects sort of dreams of you owning your own business in that regard, right? And you have to manage your body, which is your main tool. And you have to then also manage your performance around this. And everybody who runs their own business, they know that in some respect, they only eat what they catch, right? I mean, there's sort of probably some kind of metaphor around that, right? But you essentially, you have to show up. That's what I'm trying to say, right?
Right.
And so it's good to hear that you don't feel the pressure, that you still very much do it for the enjoyment of the experience and stuff.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yes.
All right. So weather is shit. You show up in Europe. You're trying to taper and get yourself situated. At least you know what you're doing over there. The cows are your friends. That you at least are comfortable. You've been in Chamonix before. Let's speak a little bit before we get into your race experience. Let's speak a little bit and shed some light into the Chamonix experience because it's just an absolute madhouse.
Yes.
How do you take this in? Do you shelter yourself off? Do you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
sponsor obligations? How do you sort of do this taper week that is supposed to
Right.
be recharging your
Yeah.
batteries,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. And I feel very fortunate because Sportiva doesn't have they have a presence there, but again, they put all their eggs in the Lavaredo basket. So I stayed holed up in our little house on the mountain away from all of the chaos. And you know, I have stayed down in the Chamonix area before, and it is just so it's hard because if you stay there and it's warm out, you have to sleep with the windows open. It's loud. There are races going off at all hours. People are yelling and cheering. It's just for people who have a sensitive nervous system like myself, it is not the ideal place to be before a race for myself. And I'm lucky that there was nowhere that I had to be, and I will always choose to um, be away and like rest instead of I didn't get fear of missing out. I didn't
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
have any of that of not being there. That's one of the perks of their media coverage being so good is I didn't have to be there. I could watch it all from the comfort of my home
Nice,
and
nice.
not feel like I've missed out. But they changed it this year because of, and now this is a whole other can of worms, but they closed down so much of the parking, probably 95% of the parking in all of the valleys to try to get people to not drive. And they made everyone buy a bus ticket. And so it's not like you could drive wherever you wanted to spectate or, you know, go here and there and everywhere. Like in the
Mm-hmm.
olden days, you
Yeah,
had
yeah.
to take this bus, which made logistic wise for a crew to kind of figure out bus timing, and it was just a whole other variable that was new to us this year, and that was a whole other reason why it's like it's not even worth going down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, I know. I think I talked with a friend of mine who was there on professional photography duties, and he was saying, I think we're sort of at a breaking point with how much the valley can handle, right? I think UTMB clearly, when it comes to the overall media attention, has theoretical room to grow into the Super Bowl, right? I mean, it is sort of insane. But I think that they're just the physical limitations of the mountains, the weather, the landslides that close tunnels, right? And so I think that there's going to be sort of a breaking point where UTMB will have to recognize and sort of scale back. And in some respects, a lot of valleys in the Alps are recognizing that car travel is becoming impossible and they're shutting that off, right? But that then requires a really good infrastructure and everybody adhering to it. And
Exactly.
yeah, it gives you a little bit less flexibility if you want to spectate and
That's right.
drive up that one forest road or whatever, right?
Right. So yeah, that was all new this year, the whole getting a bus ticket
Mm-hmm.
and figuring out all of that.
Yeah. So you ran CCC, which starts in Courmayeur, and is supposed to finish in Chamonix.
Yes.
Courmayeur is Italy, is not that far away. One tunnel through, if the tunnel actually isn't fully backed up.
Right, exactly.
Did you stay more on the Chamonix side, or did you already stay over at the starting point, or how did that like sort of get
Yeah.
yourselves to the starting line work then?
Yeah. I drove over from where we stay. When we go over there, we're like an hour and a half from Geneva, and so we're staying in Switzerland, but it's really close to the French border. And the day before the race, we drove from the small mountain town. It's called Le Creuset. We drove from Le Creuset to Courmayeur, which was about 2.5 hours. So
Okay, so that's quite far, yeah.
I stayed in the hotel that I was in the night that I booked, the tickets.
Amazing.
Somehow.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. You got your invitation while you were in Courmayeur. Fantastic. That is
So there
brilliant.
were no surprises. I knew everything that I was getting into. I'm
Fan,
like,
fan,
nothing's gonna be new. This is gonna be great.
fantastic. Fantastic. So in
The start line's
theory,
down the road.
yeah, in theory, this was supposed to all be
Yes,
good.
exactly. In theory. Yes. So we stayed in Courmayeur the night before, and then got up the next morning, and my whole pre-race routine, fine, beautiful, beautiful morning. The I could just do all my stretching in the hotel room, and then I could walk down the street to the start. Like, it couldn't have gone easier.
How do you like this European starting time in the evenings?
So
Or when does CCC start?
CCC starts at 9 a.m., which is
Oh,
late.
okay. Okay. Oh,
Which is
yeah. But
late in the day.
it is still late, right?
It
Because
is
for
still
you,
late.
US races start at 5 or 6 in the morning, right?
Yeah. It makes running in the evening unnecessary. We
Hmm.
have to run in the, like, for somebody like myself, I'm in the dark for 3 hours. Whereas if we started at 7 a.m., which is a kind of quote unquote normal time to start, you could avoid the stress of having to run in the dark and whatnot.
Hmm.
So, but I know they do it because UTMB starts that night and they have to organize everything. And I think the big reason there's a 9 a.m. start is because people have to take the bus
Oh,
from Chamonix to Courmayeur. And if the tunnel's backed up, they need time to get there in the morning. So I can understand.
and I think what they do is that they are doing timing the start time for when the finishers arrive in Chamonix.
Right,
Right?
right.
I think they want the finishers to arrive right after the start. The first finishers arrive right after the start of UTMB. So the
Right,
fans that are already in downtown Chamonix cheering, they just saw the UTMB racers out and they can hang around.
right.
And I don't actually think that's a bad idea, right?
Right.
Because starting is in some respect anyway more of a nervous atmosphere, but the finishers, if you can sort of time when the finishers all come together, I think it's actually a more beautiful finishing
Yeah, no, I
experience,
agree.
right? So I think
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
Yeah. It makes for a less chaotic morning, we'll put it that way.
Right? No,
Um,
absolutely.
but one thing that I was kind of chatting with it's funny. It's fun because when I get there, I'm there alone. I'm not there with a team, but when you see your US teammates, it
Mm-hmm.
feels so like, oh, I'm with my people. I feel like safer. It's just a really nice feeling. And you get, in these corrals, you have to be there 15 minutes beforehand, and you're just squeezed in there, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't really warm up. There's nowhere to warm up. The streets are just packed with people, and so you don't really warm up. And the reason that I'm saying that is because when the race started, it felt like it usually does, but I felt not warmed up. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, that's because I didn't warm up. So
Yeah.
that's why you feel this way. And it's gonna calm down. You're gonna get warmed up. Your heart rate's going to calm down, and your body's going to ease into it. And that never happened. So that's why I wanted to say, like,
Yeah.
we never warmed up, and I was hoping that that was part of the reason I felt the way I did starting out, but I never warmed up.
It
Warming
never
up was not going to happen.
never happened. Oh, that's a bummer. Yeah, we're leading into that. The fact that your race didn't turn out so well. Before we get into this, one more question about the
Sure.
opening corral. It's like, you as a woman there at that starting line, do you feel, I look at the percentages, it's not great, right? I mean,
Right,
do you
right.
feel being dramatically in the minority? Do you feel alone, surrounded by men, or
Yeah.
when you're there, do
Um,
you not feel it, or you're
yeah.
just used to it because that's just
Yeah.
what it is?
Yeah. I don't feel alone. No,
Okay.
no. I have the US ladies around me, and women that I have met doing these races over the year. Uh, Again, I can only speak for myself, and I wish the percentages were higher, but I don't feel alone. And like, people are nice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't feel hostility, especially with people who can speak English. You're all there together, and there's just a sense of common humanity there that I find really heartwarming. Like I don't mean to get all like emotional about this, but like I don't feel any of that. I don't feel
Yeah.
any. I
I,
feel, yeah.
I think it's a good statement. And I think, it's okay to express that and be personal and not use it as an excuse to let them off the hook, right? I mean, the
Right,
percentages
right,
abysmal
right.
are abysmal, and I'm glad that they're working on readjusting the index, right? That your performance is actually on par and you're not down in the 600-700s when the men are in the 900s, right? I mean,
Right,
I think
right, right.
they're doing work, and we need to keep holding their feet to the fire in that regard. But it is also really great that you don't feel that way, because in the end it is, we all one humanity, and if we can get along and if we get excited together for this experience that we're about to have, right, then it is a special moment, and that's great. That's great to hear, and great to it's great to know too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, great. All right, so you didn't warm up.
I didn't warm up. My body was like, psych.
It's like, well, your heart might have been warm because of all the great feelings and the opening music, but
right.
it didn't translate into what your muscles were supposed to be delivering.
Yeah. It was just one of those days, and and I've had a lot of time to sit with this, and I've gone through the gambit of the grief and the sadness and the frustration and the anger and the embarrassment and the shame that all comes with dropping out of a race that is inevitable if you're in the sport long enough. And I can't, and again, it's the best way that I can describe how I felt is similar to how I described to you how I knew that I had it at Lavaredo. Like, it's this subtle feeling of I got this. It was a very subtle feeling of I don't got this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, today is not happening. It's, and again, if you've been training long enough and you're so in tune with your body and like what it can and cannot do, this wasn't I'm capable and this is hard, this is hurts, I can still push and do this. This was, the more that I try, the more my body is rebelling and like shutting down. And so that was not the race that clearly it wasn't the race that I wanted, but it was happening so early on that I didn't want to be out there for 16, 17 hours, come in at 3 a.m. for me, for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't out to prove anything. I had the intention of really going for it if my body allowed on the day. But once I realized that it wasn't happening, the decision that I made was, I don't want to be out here suffering. I've done that before. I know how to do that. That's not what I want to do today. That's not, no decision is easy. I don't want to walk to Chamonix and I don't want to drop out. But at least if I drop out, number one, my body's going to be able to recover faster, and I'm not going to be doing any damage. And perhaps I can, a friend told me that DNF stands for did nothing foolish. And I really like that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think in a culture where it's, never stop, never quit, all this thing, which, I feel needs context around it, right? Like, yeah, I mean, that's good in some reasons, but to never stop, never quit. I mean, never quit an abusive relationship, never quit a stressful job that is ruining your life. Like, we need some context here. So I think we can take that to the extreme. So there's nuance to everything. So I've come to peace with my decision, and in the scheme of life, it's one race. I'm fortunate that I have opportunities to try again if I want to next year. Learning that I came back too fast from the effort that I gave in June, traveling to Europe, even if it is comfortable and quote unquote easy, relatively, because I'm familiar with the ins and outs. It's still a lot. It's still a lot. And so we finished there, and we still had like a week left, and I took time to sit with it. And when I say we, I mean my husband and I kind of sat and processed together, and we tried to go on a couple mountain runs and hikes, and my body still felt like shit, but like nothing came to pass in this second trip. The runs that we had planned to explore different areas were never panned out the way that we wanted to. It was just kind of funny. It was so drastically different from our first trip there. But just accepting that that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, and it sucks, and sports are hard and they're heartbreaking. And just to go through the emotions of that, I think it's all part of it. And I'm trying to take lessons learned, and I took lots of time off when I came back.
Nice.
My family came out to the Pacific Northwest and visited, and I took time completely off from running, from lifting, from all movement. And so I'm just now starting to get back into things.
Yeah, no. Well, it's great to hear that you were able to listen to your body and able to sort of process that. And I think the more of an elite athlete you are, the more you understand what's going on, right? I think there are situations where an amateur who sees it as this one-time experience can death march it in or so, right? Exactly. But for you, the never quitting comes in the larger career span and not the individual experiences.
Yes,
right?
I appreciate you saying that. Yes. Yeah.
And then there's also the reality, right? I mean, if you are within, I don't know, 20% left in the race or so, right? You might be able to pull through, right? But if you already feel that so early on such a deep level, because especially in ultra, sometimes people sort of get a second wind or so, right? But you need to have had at least the first wind, right? You can have perhaps a temporary moment where things go shit. And you're like, okay, this might not be happening, but I know. And so perhaps, but if it doesn't happen right from the get-go, then
that's funny. I didn't even have a little breeze that day. There was no first wind.
Yeah. Well, CCC it's such a thrill, and it's such an insane crowd and stuff. Is there anything else that you sort of observed, took away from it, or were you too focused on your racing experience? And
I think for my race, I was very, in the race, and I am a super focused racer, and so I wasn't really taking in everything around me. But the next day is a very special moment, one that I will not forget. And I think it's, I mean, there are videos of it everywhere, but I was fortunate to be there. There's a point in the UTMB race. It's called Forclaz, and it's right where it's still in Switzerland, but it's the point of the course where you could actually drive to. They didn't mark off parking. And so that's where we actually usually go to watch UTMB. We didn't know everybody in France and Switzerland were going to be there too. So we tried to find a place to park to watch Jim and Zach come through. There was nowhere to park. So we went to eat lunch, and we're like, okay, we're going to try again. And right when we came in, somebody pulled out. We got our parking spot. And so we went and we waited on Courtney to come through in the most insane crowd I have ever experienced in my life. The adrenaline that I felt, I wasn't even running, and I thought I was going to throw up. It was so intense. It was so electric. It's mind blowing what it was like.
Yeah. I think these images, they mark a turning point in our sport in some respects, right? We've gotten used to the finisher arch in downtown Chamonix and the crowds, but these images were something completely different. And I 1,000,000,000% love that they were for Courtney and not for the man.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I mean, these were not Americans waving US flags, and little girls wearing red, white, and blue, and men wearing Courtney faces, and people dressed up as toothpaste, throwing toothpaste in the crowd. Like, it was bonkers. It was absolutely bonkers.
I love that you were able to experience that firsthand, and yet you are bringing that experience to the show. Seeing Courtney coming through as a competitive athlete yourself, you said you felt feeling throwing up. Do you feel competitive jealousy? Do you feel like
Oh
this
God.
should be me, or do
Oh
you?
no, not even close to that. Not at all. It's so much pride to have her representing the female athletes and just the US. And oh my gosh, no, the joy and the just absolute elation for her. Oh, there's only one Courtney Dauwalter. That's like wishing you were Beyonce or something. Like, no way. Like, there's none of that.
I mean, I asked this question because I wanted to hear you say this, because number one, I believe it really represents the beauty of our sport, that as much as there is a competitive side to it, I think, I don't know how many years, generations we are away from elbowing each other. Like, the competition is with ourselves, right? The competition is really not with other people, because endurance running is so extremely hard. You manage yourself, and everyone has a different journey, different part in their career, and we're celebrating each other. And
There's nothing like it. It's
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I think there is a way of celebrating others without feeling like there's not enough for us, right?
Oh yeah, yeah,
It's so great.
yeah. It was. I mean, honestly, that moment was probably the best moment of the trip. Watching that, it was so remarkable. It was so remarkable in so many aspects. It like blew my mind. I'm so grateful to have witnessed that.
Yeah. I sit on the West Coast. I slept, and when UTMB starts, living on the West Coast, and then, eventually you need some sleep, right? Especially when you're training right now too, right? You're trying to bank some sleep. So I woke up and I had actually missed. Throughout the night, I've been trying to follow along Jim and Zach and stuff, and so I've actually missed Jim overtaking Zach, and then I've missed the man coming in to the finish. So by the time I woke up, that was already sort of done. And I was like, okay, I need a long run. It's Saturday morning. And so I waited. And then, Katharina Hartmut was in second, the German. And so and at that point, she wasn't in second. She was like in fifth or something like that. And that race, the women's race between 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 was an absolute intense race. Yeah. And to be able to watch that, I was like glued to the screen. And and once that you get to celebrate Courtney, and then you get this follower race fall, and then once the top 3 were in, so that's when I finally got out of my run. But yeah, it was incredible. It was perfect for the West Coast. It was perfect timing to watch the women's race this year.
Yes. Yeah. No, it was incredible.
Fantastic. So since we're already talking about watching and the media, tell me a little bit your perspective. You are an elite athlete. How do you feel does the media currently portray our sport and you? Do you feel like, I don't know, what I'm just curious to see what you see. I'm curious to see if you feel like something is missing. We as the media, right? Me, the podcaster here, if we can do something better. What is our role as the media from your perspective? Because in some respects, and this is sort of the key piece, I think that in all other sports, media has become so powerful that it has allowed a transition from participatory sport to spectator sport. And by and large, because endurance running is so boring to watch, except scenes like these, our sport is still 90-ish% an absolute. I don't know if anybody watches our sport without actually participating in it. Where and how many people watch basketball and they never dribble, right? Right. And so by and large, we are a participatory sport, not a spectator sport. And the media sort of sees a business opportunity, that's what media is, right? To sort of turn it into a spectator sport. But in some respects, we want storytelling. You still want that storytelling. I'm giving you a giant word salad of a sort of thought process where I'm at with all of this, where I'm like, it's important that we tell the stories of the races and the runners, the leads, and everyone's sort of experience.
Mhm.
But at the same time, we don't want to make the sport to turn into a spectator sport. We still want the ultimate motivation to be, you watch something, you read something, you tie your shoes and go out on a run, right?
Right,
So
right.
where do you see this? Are
Oh
you
my gosh.
paying attention? Are you
Um,
wishing you would get more coverage for what you're doing? I don't know where you're at. Like,
yeah, I honestly I don't know where I'm at either, but we'll think about it a second. I'm I'm so much where I clearly am a fan of the sport, but I am not it's not everything that I consume. And so I'm not one that looks to all the media. I don't drink in as much as I can. There's a limit to my capacity of
mhm,
running. Usually when I'm done running for the day, I don't think about it anymore. Like I'm done, I'd switch hats. So I'm not one that is like, I need all the content. I need to know about all the people all the time. That being said, I think what has been done has been amazing and incredible, and it gives people access um, to witness these events and also allow them to dream big.
mhm,
Like I like if somebody is watching those scenes, I want to be there. I want to experience what it's like to be in a crowd like that. Um, and I think I think something perhaps that's missing are the stories of the people that are you would never think to ask stories from. Like this sport is it's so diverse, and that's something that I think, how many times, and I'm going to say we, the collective we, because again, the people who are listening to this are runners, how many times do we run by somebody and they're like, oh, you're so amazing. Like they think we're doing something that is just like they can't wrap their head around it. But when they start to see how I don't want to, accessible is not the right word because I know there are limitations there, but it doesn't take an act of heroism to complete these feats of strength that are built
mhm.
up. I don't know if I'm making sense or am I having a coherent thought, but I really like to hear the stories of people who just go out there and do it while balancing a family and life and like all this stuff because they love the connection to the trails and the environment and the people.
Mhm.
Um, so I, I so much of the media is on the kind of the front end of things and the competitive aspect. Um, and I think we sometimes forget that we share the start line with all ages, all genders, all backgrounds, and what other sport can do that? I
Mhm.
mean, it's incredible.
This is the one of the most unique and wonderful aspects of our sport, right? That
Yes, yes,
that we still have the same start line. We don't
yeah,
have elite
yeah.
packs up front, right? And
Right,
I think
right,
we need to
right.
preserve that. And I think it's the media's responsibility to continue to play their role in preserving that and highlighting that
Yeah,
unique aspect
exactly,
of what our
exactly.
sport's all about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When my dad was here, he was talking, and again, my parents aren't runners. They only know what I tell them. And so my dad's like, you're getting older. Your body's not, I know. And I'm like, Dad, you have no idea. Like I still have years if I want, body willing, knock on wood, all the things. But this sport just lends itself to, you can just keep, the world is your oyster in terms of age goes. There's no limit on it,
Yeah, yeah. Didn't you tell him
No,
about
he has no
Ludo,
idea.
who came in
Yeah,
fifth and
I
was
know,
49 or
no,
something like that,
no.
right?
Right. Like that kind of like
Yeah.
just unawareness of the mountain trail scene. So anyway, oh
No,
God.
this is, I mean, that's, to be quite honest, that's something that attracted me to the sport, right? Because I
Mhm.
think, especially, I think as a spectator sport in these like highly professional, commercialized sports, yeah, by the time you hit 29, 32, your career is at an end, right? I mean, there is somebody new that is hungrier, healthier, and is willing to out dribble you in whatever you're doing, right? And so there's this weird understanding, and I think we actually internalize that and think of ourselves that by the time we hit our early 30s, it's over and we can sort of, sign up for AARP and be done with our lives.
Right.
And I think our sport is still deep enough and wide enough in opportunity that, and in some respect, gentle enough too, right? Because I mean, I don't know how many of my friends I know who played soccer in Germany and they eventually blew their knee out, right? Because it is more of a body contact sport, right? And so I think you can, you can keep doing that, which is great for you, because you're already planning of 2024 to toe the starting line at Lavaredo with me. I like it.
Exactly. We'll start booking tickets.
I like it. Well, to be quite honest, I have a tricky issue, and that is that I need my qualifier. I need a Finnish Kodiak 100K in mid-October.
Oh, that's coming up.
It is coming up.
Okay.
And the problem, my worry is that if the index isn't updated from UTMB fast enough, then the pre-registration window for Lavaredo might close. So number one, I hope I finish, which is also not a given. I'm doing everything I can to make that part work, right? Sure. But the other part is to make sure that my index is up to date to get that. That's what I'm working on.
Got it. Okay, I get it.
Very last question. You've given me a lot of your time, and I super appreciate it. What's the current shoe you run with?
Let's see.
Especially, let's make it easy and say, what was the shoe you ran with your Lavaredo? Like 80K.
The Akasha 2. La Sportiva Akasha 2. They are, I mean, you could do them across the board. Just, they're a workhorse. They can handle anything.
I had the Akasha and I really liked it, and I've never tried the Akasha 2. I've since I've tried a few, and I've run in the carousels, and I really like the carousel. That's currently, especially for long distances.
Yes, and wider toe box.
Wider toe box. I really like it. But I really like some of my first big distances I ran in the Akasha 1, and I liked it. So I need to try. I need to try that out.
It's great. I mean, you can't go wrong with that one, in my opinion.
I love, for short stuff, I like the Captivas. I don't know if there's a newer version. I think they are so nimble and light and responsive, right? I mean, they blow your feet out if you try to stay in there for too long, right?
Right. Yeah, that's right. But they are great for maybe a sub-ultra distance, for sure.
Well, super. All right. So, I've got all your links from last time. You have a website. Give us and our listeners, a quick rundown of where they can reach you.
I'm super easy to get a hold of. I'm on Instagram, just my full name, Maria Dalzot, and my website is mariadalzotrd.com. The RD stands for registered dietitian, not race director. I am a nutrition therapist with a private practice, so I have that's what I do when I'm not running. So I'm easy to get hold of if anybody has any questions, or I can help support anybody on their journey in any way. Communication and connection is really important to me, so please don't hesitate.
Perfect. Super. Yeah, we didn't even talk about this at all this time around. There was way too much to talk about.
That's okay.
Maria, thank you so much for joining me again. It was an absolute incredible journey. It helps my homesickness to the Alps that I get to hear great stories. It makes it feel a lot better and a lot worse in many ways.
Well, thank you. Thank you to everyone listening.